2 till.
Okay, because I got lunch too.
I started coughing last night, so.
Do you want to talk to him?
No. Just saying, I have a good idea of who to blame. No.
Jordan and I kind of joked after being in the room with all the jurors that we were going to come out of this safe. There's no way.
I think we had just finished direct. Is that correct?
What's that?
Had you finished direct? No. All right. That's right.
They're working on that right now.
I think they were uploaded.
Yeah,
As-
they're not marked. Oh, this one?
Right.
I was having some issues with the color scanner yesterday, but then we let it work this morning. So those should be filed.
Yep.
And then those are getting photos.
Yep. Right.
All rise.
All right, go ahead and have a seat, everybody. Okay, we are back on the record. We have our jurors, counsel, Mr. Jackson, everybody we need present. I hope you all had a good night. I'm just going to say before I forget, I really appreciate how timely you folks have been as jurors. That's not always the case, and you guys have been here, not caused us any delays. In fact, you've had to wait for us, and that's going to happen sometimes, as I explained, but we've never had to wait for you, and I just want to let you know how much I appreciate that. That doesn't happen all the time, and thank you very much for that. So, yeah. Okay. All right, as you may recall yesterday, Investigator Denlinger was on the stand. He's still there, and Investigator Denlinger, I would remind you, sir, that you are still under oath, and I believe Mr. Scheer was still questioning Investigator Denlinger as part of his direct examination, and Mr. Scheer, you may continue with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Investigator Denlinger.
Good morning.
Where we left off yesterday was just finally reviewing the clips from the Nest Cam on State's Exhibit 6 from the Young's house. Do you recall reviewing those clips?
Yes.
And similar how you reviewed all of the clips from the Ring doorbell that's on State's Exhibit 154, did you review all 6 hours of the Nest Cam on State's Exhibit number 6?
I did.
And when you reviewed all 6 hours from the Nest Cam on State's Exhibit 6, did you ever see anyone besides the officers leaving the Jackson residence?
No.
Besides the officers, did you ever see anyone enter into the Jackson residence?
No.
Did you ever see anybody in the area appear to wear all black with green shoes?
No.
Kind of going back to the Ring doorbell cameras found on the Jackson home, when reviewing all of those cameras, which door did it appear that the Jacksons used most?
The front door.
And which door had the most activity?
The front door.
And even which door did you see the Jackson take their dog Hero out of?
The front door.
Based off of reviewing multiple clips for multiple days, Were you surprised that you did not see many clips of the Jacksons leaving out from the back door?
I wasn't particularly surprised.
Were you surprised that you didn't see any clips from June 15th of 2021 where you would have seen the officers in the backyard?
Yeah, that I was surprised.
Just kind of in generally speaking of Ring doorbell cameras, are you familiar with them?
I am.
Have you had experience using them?
I have.
How are you familiar with them?
Well, my father got one recently. He's a little bit older and not quite so tech savvy, so he had me set it up for him. I can pull it up on my phone and monitor it. Sometimes I do that just to see if they came home or, you know, if I'm going to stop by or something like that. But I helped him set that up and some of the zones and things like that.
You said quite a bit there, and also, sorry, some of it was kind of lost because we had some movement in the back. If I can have you kind of move the microphone a little bit closer to you, just so you can speak a little bit louder.
Sure.
You said that I think that you're familiar with because you've helped your father set it up and also kind of set the zones up with the camera.
Correct.
And I think you said that you could even operate them from your phone. Is that correct?
Correct.
How do you operate a Ring doorbell camera from your phone?
There's an app. You just download the app, set up an account, and then you can adjust the settings and things through the app.
What about a tablet? Can you operate it from a tablet?
Yeah, he actually uses his iPad to operate it.
What about just an online program from a computer?
Yep, you could do it from a computer. I've helped him use his computer for that too.
And when you are operating it, do you have an account, or how are you able to make sure that you are viewing that specific camera or set of cameras?
Right, you have to set up an account and a password so that you're able to access, you know, your particular account and cameras.
And it sounds like that you have an account as well as your father has an account for your own experience.
Right.
And did the Jackson family have an account for the 4 cameras?
Yes.
And with the accounts, if there are multiple cameras, does each camera have its own type of settings?
Correct. You can adjust the settings for each particular camera.
And what do you mean by just the settings for each additional camera?
Well, the basic settings are, so these are motion-activated cameras, and so the basic settings, you can adjust the sensitivity. So do you want the camera to trip every time a leaf blows or maybe a fly goes in front of it? Or do you need something a little more substantial? So you can adjust that, and then you could adjust the zone. So the direction the camera points, you can basically put a little fence around an area that you want that motion to be detected in. You know, maybe in this particular case, they had them all adjusted.
And so what do you mean by motion detection?
Motion would be, you know, cars, people, you know, walking through. You could see it on the camera that the neighbors would walk by or a car would drive down the street and it would trip the motion sensor and record a short image.
And what's motion sensitivity?
Motion sensitivity, again, that's like, I think of that as in how much movement is needed to trip the camera. You could, again, sometimes people have plants and stuff, and again, you don't want every little leaf that blows to set that thing off, and you're getting notifications on your phone all day, so.
And what is, when you say motion zone, or excuse me, the zone for the camera zones for each camera or camera, what's that mean?
Well, again, if, you know, we had a camera in here and I didn't want to capture the back couple of rows because there was, you know, that's not part of my yard or something like that, I could set it up so it would just stop there. And as you're setting it up, you can visually see, you know, a line around where you want to do it. Sometimes, like my father's, for example, we set it at the sidewalk, tried to do the front edge of the sidewalk so that everyone walked by didn't set it off. But if you crossed into his yard or stepped on his porch with a delivery, that would set it off.
When you were checking the defendant's phone, did you ever see if he had the Ring doorbell app?
Yeah, we downloaded his phone. I didn't see the Ring doorbell app on his phone.
Is it easy to remove apps or the Ring doorbell app from a phone?
Yeah, he had a knife.
Sustained.
I guess, in your own opinion, just with your own phone, is it easy to remove apps?
Same objection.
Overruled, you can answer the question.
I can eliminate an app or delete an app in 2 seconds.
And once again, just to be clear, with the camera on the backyard, the only clippings that you recover were those 2 clippings that showed the defendant.
Correct.
And when you look at that area and look at officer's body camera, are you sure that they were in the same area that the defendant was when we saw him on June 14th in the backyard?
Yes, I made a specific point of watching everyone's body camera just to see if someone walked in that exact line that he walked, and you can definitely see an officer walk that path. And I went back there and walked it. Before I'd even seen the camera, I'd walked that whole backyard on my own, and it didn't capture me either.
Investigator Denlinger, have you ever heard of gunshot residue?
I have.
And in your experience, have you dealt with gunshot residue?
I've tried.
Well, what is gunshot residue?
It's basically gunpowder that's expelled from a gun when it's fired, usually from the barrel or the ejection port.
How does it get on a person?
It just sprays out of a gun, and it would get on your clothing or hands or whatever.
Can it get on people who are close to a gun that don't fire it?
Yeah, if you fired a gun in a car, it could get on everyone.
So if you just have the mere presence of gunshot residue, does that indicate who fires a gun necessary?
No, you'd potentially just be proximity, assuming you knew a gun was actually fired.
What happens if a person is covered in some type of fluid, like blood, water, oil, anything? What would that do to gunshot residue?
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. I think we've gone beyond the area of this witness's expertise.
The objection's overruled. You can answer the question.
Well, like anything, there's got the potential to wash something on your skin off, liquids.
And what if someone washes their hands after shooting a firearm? What could that do with gunshot residue?
Your Honor, I'm going to object, and may I voir dire the witness?
You may.
Good morning, investigator.
Good morning.
How many studies have you conducted on gunshot residue yourself?
None.
How many studies are you aware of about gunshot residue?
Oh, I've read probably 3 or 4.
Okay, and do any of these deal with how easy it is to wash gunshot residue off your hands?
Yes.
Which one would that have been?
I didn't print it off and bring it today, so I can't cite the reference.
And so you are able to look at studies,
I am.
yeah, and to read them and interpret them.
I'm able to read them and interpret them, yes.
I will withdraw my objection, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. If people, you already said this, if people are next to each other when a gunshot gets fired, like you said in a car, can multiple people get gunshot residue on their clothing?
Yes.
Does the Cedar Rapids Police Department test for gunshot residue?
No.
Why not?
In 1996, the state quit accepting gunshot residue test kits. It was widely accepted that they were completely inaccurate. There's too many possibilities for cross-contamination, being in the proximity, false positives. Iowa has a lot of industry that creates false positives, such as agricultural, mechanics, things like that. Lots of the chemicals that you would use in those industries can create false positives. As a general rule, they just quit doing it altogether just because it doesn't provide the information you would hope it provides.
When you are investigating in a homicide, do you try to find existing family members?
Yes.
And why do you do that?
Well, we want to interview them, get background, verify some information about the family, things of that nature.
And in this case, was there any other close by existing family members besides Mr. Jackson, excuse me, besides the defendant that was left?
No.
And with regard to that, do you have any knowledge of, strike that. When you interviewed the defendant, do you recall how much he said he had in his bank account?
$30.
And do you know through your investigation and who would get the Jackson's estate?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
The objection's overruled. You can answer the question.
Presumably he would.
And did these events all occur within Lynn County?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Denlinger, you've heard the expression, never say never, right?
I have.
Would you agree with that?
Would depend on the context.
Sure. And you are a trained police officer, are you not?
Yes.
Trained in interrogation techniques.
Yes.
And you know that when you interrogate somebody, you don't have to tell them the truth, do you?
I don't.
In fact, that's one of your interrogation techniques, is to tell somebody something you know is false.
I don't like to do that.
But you do it, don't you?
I try not to do that.
But you do it, don't you?
I try not to do that.
Have you ever told somebody something that was false in an interrogation technique?
Not as an interrogation technique.
Do you recall your interrogation of Jacqueline Holmes?
I do.
And you told her that Tremaine Williams was still alive, right?
Yes.
When you knew he was dead.
Yes.
So wouldn't that be an example right there of a time when you lied to somebody in an interrogation?
Yes, that would be a good example.
Yeah, and that technique was you wanted her to believe he was alive so that she would be worried about what he might say.
Correct. Thank
So
you.
there's a perfect example, right?
Yes.
So if it suits you in a particular circumstance, you will lie to somebody that you're interviewing.
Well, that's a good example of one. Yes.
Okay, so your answer would be yes then.
Yes.
Thank you. And because you're the police, you know, you get to choose where to interview someone, right?
I try to choose where to interview someone. Sometimes the situation dictates where I have to do it.
And you also get to choose when to interview someone.
I would prefer to choose when to interview someone, but again, if I had my choice, you would always come to the Cedar Rapids Police Department, sit in an interview room, have a great camera and microphone, and I wouldn't have anyone interrupting me. So that would be my first choice, and you would do it during my work hours.
Well, you had that choice in this case, didn't you?
No.
Well, you did. You took him to the police department later that day. He was brought to the police department, wasn't he?
Later that day it wasn't during my work hours, and it wasn't at the time that I wanted.
Sure, but you could have waited and interviewed him at that time had you chose. Waited until after he was operated on.
In this situation, if I would have waited until after he was operated on to interview him, given the circumstances, I would have fired myself.
Okay, we'll get to that. Thank you. Now, you do understand that trauma can affect memory, right?
I'm not a medical doctor. I have not studied that.
Well, I asked you that in the Jacqueline Holmes case, and you said that it would.
Well, you brought it to my attention that sometimes those things are out of my scope.
You were under oath in State of Iowa versus Jacqueline Holmes. You testified on September day 6 of the trial. It was in September. You remember testifying in that case, right?
I do.
You were sworn to tell the truth,
Yes,
right? And you took that oath seriously, I assume.
absolutely.
And I asked you this question: trauma can affect people's memory, and your answer was sure.
And I felt comfortable answering it then, but since then, you brought it to my attention that there are things outside my scope. And I'm going to go ahead and refer to your objection yesterday about that and tell you that I'm not sure what exactly the effects of trauma are.
You had no hesitation to say that when I questioned you in the Jacqueline Holmes trial, did you?
Right, because at that time I felt really comfortable answering it, just like I still feel comfortable answering the effects of fentanyl, but you objected to that also because it's outside of my scope.
Well, you were going to testify to street fentanyl, right?
No,
No. Well, you're not a medical doctor.
exactly.
All right. Anyway, we'll get to that.
Okay.
We might even get back to the fentanyl thing in a minute. But my point being that my question is, you didn't hesitate in the Jacqueline Holmes case to say that trauma can affect people's memory, did you?
I did not.
And you said that was based on your experience as a trained investigator, didn't you?
Correct.
You said that trauma can affect, I said trauma can affect the way someone wants to interact with another person. You said yes.
I did say yes.
You said, I said trauma can make you compress time into a shorter time period than it was actually, right? And you said potentially, right?
I said potentially, but again, I feel like that's out of the scope of what I'm qualified to answer.
But I asked you specifically, it was based on your training and experience as an investigator.
As an investigator, not as a doctor or a psychiatrist.
But you clearly have experienced people who were in traumatic situations.
Well, my experience as an investigator sometimes allows me to answer things, but sometimes you don't feel my experience as an investigator allows me to answer other things.
You didn't hesitate on this occasion, did you?
I didn't hesitate on that one because you hadn't questioned my experience yet.
I did. I asked you specifically if this was based on your training and experience, and you said it was.
Right, and we had that same discussion yesterday about fentanyl based on my training and experience, and you said that that didn't qualify me to answer that.
Well, I'm sorry if I
So
hurt
now-
your feelings on the fentanyl thing. We'll get back to that
It's
in a
not
minute.
about hurting my feelings. It's about whether or not I'm qualified to answer whether or not someone during dealing with trauma compresses time.
Well, you had no hesitation in saying that in September of 2022, did you?
No,
No hesitation whatsoever.
none.
I said trauma can impair your ability to remember things accurately, can't it? Your answer was yes. Right?
Right,
That was you as under oath, right?
correct.
And the next thing I said, and you know that as an investigator. And you said, I do. Right?
Correct.
You know that someone in a traumatic situation can experience tunnel vision. Remember when I asked you that?
I do remember when you asked me that.
Your answer was yes. Right?
Right,
In other words, focusing on one small thing and nothing around you. Your answer was yes, right?
right.
In other words, what we're talking about is that trauma can cause people to be confused. You would agree with that, would you not?
Well, I previously would have agreed to that.
In fact,
But you
okay, go
seem
ahead.
to think that some things like that require a medical degree to answer.
Well, you haven't learned anything to the contrary, have you?
No,
All right. So since September 22nd, or whatever date that was, I'm sorry, September of 2022, you haven't learned anything different about trauma and its effects than what you told me on that occasion, have you?
no,
All right. So you still stand by those answers that you said under oath, wouldn't you?
absolutely.
All right. So what you're complaining about is that because I objected to your ability to testify about fentanyl, now you're saying this is beyond the scope of your expertise. That's your argument right now.
No, I don't think this is beyond the scope of my expertise at all, just like I think the answer about fentanyl is not beyond the scope of my expertise.
I get that.
You're just choosing what's beyond the scope of my expertise because you don't want to hear the answer.
No, the judge is choosing what's beyond the scope of your expertise. I lodged an objection.
Well, the judge didn't object. You did.
Yeah, I did. And we'll get back to the fentanyl. Don't worry. Okay, we'll get back to the fentanyl. And one of the reasons, if you recall our discussion, that you know that traumatic events can cause people to be confused is in an analogous situation we discussed about an officer-involved shooting. Remember when we had that?
Objection, Your Honor. These questions are going to go with an officer shooting someone. I'd like to know where the relevance is because the defendant is claiming his client didn't shoot anybody, so how is there a relevance between an officer shooting somebody and a defendant not shooting somebody?
I can clear it up, Your Honor. I can make it.
The objection's overruled at this point, subject to Mr. Johnson establishing relevance. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. In other words, an officer-involved shooting would be a stressful situation for an officer, wouldn't it?
I agree.
There are oftentimes officers have to make decisions about people's lives and death, and sometimes they have to shoot somebody, right?
Yes.
And that's to protect themselves.
Yes.
So they go home at night.
Correct.
And then sometimes when an officer does that, they are traumatized by that situation.
Your Honor, once again, to the relevance of an officer shooting someone compared to someone not shooting someone, there is a distinct here where someone fires a gun having to have some type of trauma. Someone did not fire a gun at anybody. So the defense is claiming that their client now fired a gun at someone.
We-
Then there is relevance.
We're not claiming that, Your Honor.
The objection's overruled. Go ahead.
Thank you. But you would agree, as you've already said, that that can be a stressful, traumatic situation for an officer.
I think it could be.
Yep. And the Cedar Rapids Police Department agrees with you, right?
Yes.
In fact, the Cedar Rapids Police Department has what they call a peer support team, don't they?
Yes.
And in every officer-involved shooting, the peer support team is activated, right?
I believe so.
And part of the peer support team is to give counseling to the officer involved
Yes.
to make sure that they're okay.
Yes.
And one of the policies of the Cedar Rapids Police Department is that an officer is given 72 hours after a traumatic event before he has to make a statement about what happened. That's correct, is it not?
So I know you're referencing a prior conversation that we had in 72 hours. So after that conversation, I examined our policies, and I could find no specific time in there. That doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that I didn't find 72 hours. So if you can cite the exact policy, I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily, but I don't believe that I read that myself.
Understood. I'm referencing peer support from the Cedar Rapids Police Department, page 1 of 4. At the bottom of that, it talks about procedure. Do you want to look at it, or do you want me to just read it to you?
You can read it.
Okay. Arrangements will be made for department personnel debriefing within 72 hours of the incident termination, if so needed. That's where the 72 hours comes from.
Okay. If it's all right with you, could I read it also?
Oh, yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
absolutely.
You may.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. Can you show me where you're Okay. Thank you.
You agree the time period is 72 hours then?
Could you rephrase the question for me, please?
Would you agree that the time period is 72 hours?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question before that? I'm sorry. I think there was a question before you read that I didn't quite answer.
Would you agree that okay, I'll ask you a different question.
Thank you.
Would you agree that an officer is given up to 72 hours before he has to make a statement?
Yes, up to 72 hours.
Okay. And that's to allow the officer time to rest, right?
Yes.
To get counseling, right?
Yes.
And to make sure that he's not suffering from any of the effects of trauma that might impair his ability to accurately relate the details of what happened, right?
I'm not 100% sure what the rationale for allowing up to 72 hours. I mean, in theory, you could just come in and give the statement right away. We're allowed to do that.
You are allowed to do that.
Yes.
But if an officer wants to take that time, he can do it, right?
Yeah, if you don't want to answer it right away, he can take that time.
And that's a specific policy of the Cedar Rapids Police Department.
Yeah, correct.
It recognizes that trauma can affect memory, right?
Correct.
Trauma can affect perception, right?
Yeah, sure.
Trauma can cause confusion.
It could, yes.
Now, you want to talk about fentanyl, so let's do that. You also realize from your experience as a trained investigator that when somebody is medicated, that
Questions about medication based off of Mr. Johnson's own objection yesterday, he's already made it quite clear that he is not qualified to answer questions about the effect of fentanyl, which is a medication, so therefore he wouldn't be qualified to answer any questions about the effect of any medication.
That, Your Honor, may I approach, or?
Come on up. All right. Mr. Johnson, why don't you go ahead and proceed with some questioning?
In your experience as a police officer, have you had opportunities to observe people who've been anesthetized?
Objection, Your Honor, again. I'm objecting that he's not qualified to answer these questions. We haven't seen anything, so unless the defense is willing to waive.
As to that question, the objection's overruled.
Have you had the opportunity to see people, maybe not even as an officer, but have you seen people who have been under anesthesia?
Yes.
And have you seen people that have come out of anesthesia?
Yes.
And you know that anesthesia can cause people to be euphoric at times, right?
Yes.
And confused,
Yes.
not even know where they are,
Yes.
and say really dumb things, right?
Yes.
We get a lot of these YouTube videos of people coming out of anesthesia, and sometimes a really nice family member will videotape the whole thing and put it up there, right?
Correct.
And it almost always shows somebody who's happy, right?
Yes.
Sing-songy, right?
I've not actually seen what you're talking about,
Okay.
so
Oh, okay. All right. But saying really dumb stuff. Yeah.
I've experienced that, yes.
All right. So you would recognize in your experience that people who have been anesthetized or under medication like that can experience those emotions, right?
I've experienced people coming out of anesthesia.
Okay. All right. And you've experienced, and you also know that because of the anesthesia is like a pain medication, that it can cause those other effects on people, right? The ones we've just discussed.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you knew before you went to interview Mr. Jackson on this occasion that he was in the hospital, right?
Yes, on his way to the hospital is what I first knew.
And you got a little bit of a debriefing from Officer Brown, right, before you went into to question Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
And Officer Brown told you he's not there.
Yes.
And Investigator Lucina agreed. She said, I can see that.
Yes.
And you knew at this time that he'd been given 100 of fentanyl, right?
Not at that time. I didn't know. I had to go back and watch the body camera later to see when that happened.
It was fair to assume, wasn't it, that if he's not there or if he's out of it, that he'd been given some pain medication by the ambulance?
It may be fair to assume, but I hadn't made that assumption.
Well, there was a discussion in front of you in the emergency room that he'd been given fentanyl, wasn't there?
Yeah, I saw that on the camera also, but they weren't talking to me, so I didn't catch that. It was a bunch of conversations going on related to his treatment that I didn't pay that close of attention to.
And, well, whether you heard it or not, maybe you just don't remember that you heard it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it on the camera, but like I said, they were having lots of conversations in front of me. I didn't catch everything they were saying.
And the male paramedic said vitals have been all stable. I gave him 100 of fentanyl. Remember when he said that?
From the video, I remember that.
Well, you were present. Again, you were present in the room, right?
Right.
Okay. And so when you went to the hospital, you knew that Mr. Jackson had been shot in the foot, right?
I did, yes.
That he could very well be traumatized.
Yes.
He could be in shock.
Yes.
And he was under medication, right?
Well, again, I think we just covered that, but
All right, fine. And you chose to go interview him at that time,
yes.
knowing the effects that trauma can have on someone, right?
Yes.
Knowing the effects of what medication can have on someone.
Yes.
And not only did you go there to talk to him, when you go to the ER, you see doctors and nurses are attending to this young man, right?
Correct.
You know that he's 20 years old.
Correct.
He's openly bleeding
Correct.
from a gunshot wound, right?
Correct.
You set up your camera in the emergency room.
Correct.
This is so you can film it, right?
Yes.
Because you know, if this case goes to trial, this will be played before the jury, won't it?
Correct. And also so we could, capture things.
Sure, sure.
I didn't have a recorder with me, so this would be a good way to capture all the things that are said in the interview. You can only write so fast, and sometimes that distracts you from your questions. So it's a good way to record it so I could remember later.
But you also know that this video will be played before the jury
Conceivably, yes, absolutely.
if it goes to trial.
Right, that's the point of the body cam.
And so you set this camera up, right?
Yes, we set it up in the
Didn't
room.
tell Mr. Jackson that he was being videotaped.
No, but we set it right in front of him.
While he was bleeding, right? In the emergency room. You would agree with that, right?
Yes.
In his hospital gown, right?
Yes.
Laying on a gurney, right?
Laying on a gurney, yes.
While he was medicated
Yes.
and very possibly in shock.
Yes.
After being told by a fellow officer that he wasn't there, right? Meaning he wasn't all there mentally,
Yes.
and having Investigator Lucina say, I can see that, right?
Yes.
That's when you decided you were going to make this video.
The second he got off the ambulance, we decided we were going to continue to make the video that started at his house.
So a video that you knew would reflect the defendant's attitude and demeanor.
Yeah, I wanted to capture things so you could see it for yourself, and I could remember everything later. In my office, I could put my headphones on and try to hear, everything that was being said.
But it would also reflect your attitude and demeanor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the attitude and demeanor of Investigator Lucina.
Definitely.
And you knew that would be played before the jury as well.
It's always played.
Right?
Yeah, all of our videos are always played.
That always played.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did we start videotaping interviews of defendants? Do you remember?
I don't know the date on that.
It didn't used to always be the case, did it?
No, we didn't always have a good setup for that or good technology for that.
Used to have to just rely on the officer's version of what the defendant said, right?
Yes.
So then along came videos, right?
Right.
And now we didn't have to rely on just what the officer said.
Exactly.
But police officers also realized that they could put their attitudes and their demeanor on the camera as well.
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled, you can answer.
Well, I'm aware that everything I do and say is going to be on camera.
And be viewed potentially by a jury, right?
Definitely.
So you could use that opportunity to try to influence the jury, couldn't you?
That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get as much information as I can out of the person that I'm interviewing. And my behavior and things are meant to influence that person.
That's not what you're trying to do, is influence the jury.
I'm trying to influence the person I'm speaking to.
Yeah, I understand that. I get that. But you're also trying to influence the jury, aren't you, on those videos?
I'm actually not trying to do that at all. We got to get a long ways down the road before I can influence you guys. I really just want to focus on him. I'm in that moment. I got to get that information.
So you go in with Alex in the emergency room, right?
Yes.
Didn't have to interview him then.
You said that before, but I mean, if you think about it, if I don't interview him there, the one person that witnessed this happen, the one person that could provide information, and I wait 72 hours because the gunman who murdered 3 people and shot him is wandering out in the neighborhood, he dies in the emergency room, and now we got no information. Like I said before, I'd fire myself if I did something that stupid.
You could get a description from him and leave, right?
You know, for all the same reasons I just mentioned, why would you stop at a description?
Maybe because he's
Based on your
traumatized.
rationale, the description wouldn't even be valid.
Maybe because he's traumatized. And that could affect his memory. Did you consider that?
Yeah, absolutely consider it. You can listen to it for yourself.
Yes. And did you consider that the medication may also be affecting him?
Absolutely. I don't use the medication you're on when I determine whether or not I'm going to interview you. I take it so we have that information later and we can use it. And you can kind of compare it with the actual interview itself. Is he following? Is he tracking? Is he answering appropriately to my questions? Is he saying nonsensical things? Is he singing to himself? Is he laughing? Is he doing the things you described?
Is he crying? Is he showing the appropriate amount of sadness over the death of his family members? That's another thing, right? Right?
Those are things that I take into account when I'm determining what I feel about the situation, yes.
And the fact that he's medicated with something that could cause euphoria might actually affect his ability to cry at that particular moment.
Sure, of course.
Sure. But that isn't going to stop you from trying to make the point, or the prosecution, that he didn't cry enough, is it?
You can decide for yourself if you thought he cried enough.
I had Officer Brown sitting in that same seat and asked him at one point in this interview whether the defendant was crying, and he said, a little, not very much, very short period of time. Right? That's one thing you guys like to point out, is if somebody you think is behaving inappropriately to the circumstances that other people would behave in.
Objection to argumentative.
Overruled, you can answer.
I've not pointed any of that out until you brought it up.
No, I'm saying that's one of the problems with interviewing somebody who's not under medication, who's suffered a traumatic event, to go and interview them right away. That's one of the problems with it.
Well, there's a lot of problems with trying to interview someone in an emergency room. Like I said before, it's not ideal. I would prefer that you had nothing in your system and that you were sitting in the police department and it was quiet and, you know, but situations dictate that I don't really have a choice.
But you did have a choice. I'm not saying, nobody's saying you have to wait 72 hours, but you could at least wait till his foot stopped bleeding, till they fixed his foot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, technically I had a choice, but it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like you really have to do it. I mean, the choice is his to whether or not he wants to talk to me, and I told him that.
Yeah, and he said he would. He said he would talk to you.
Right.
He wanted to talk to you. Right?
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that he's still not suffering from the effects of shock, right?
Correct.
Or the medication that he's under, right?
Yes.
In terms of his attitude and his demeanor, right?
Correct.
You read him his rights when you got there, right?
I did.
And he said, and so he could have asked for a lawyer at that time.
Yeah, he could have just said, hey, can we wait 72 hours? I don't want to talk right now.
He didn't say that, did he?
Nope,
You've had plenty of people ask for an attorney, though, haven't you?
I have.
But Alex, not only did he not want a lawyer, he was happy to see you.
Right.
When you said, we're from the police department, Alex said, good. He told you he wanted the guy caught, right?
Yes.
He answered your questions
Yes.
politely.
Yes.
And to him, you're an authority figure, right?
You're asking me if he thought I was.
Yeah, you would be an authority figure to him, wouldn't you?
He may have thought that. I don't know what he thought.
He thought you were there to help him. That's what he said, right?
I hope he thought that.
Yeah. But that's not why you were there.
Of course that's why I was there.
So instead of just getting a description of the person, you grilled him for 5 hours at the hospital.
No.
You were there for 5 hours?
We started the interview approximately 9:15, and the interview was over at approximately 1:15. So
4 hours?
there you go.
Okay. So you grilled him for 4 hours?
Yeah, I see what you did there.
And but one of you on each side of his gurney, most of the time, right?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
You were on one side of his gurney. Investigator Lucina was on the other side of his gurney.
Yes.
And you were firing off questions at him,
Yes, we were asking him questions.
back and forth. Right?
Yes.
While he was laying there, right?
Yes.
While he was bleeding
Yes.
in his hospital robe.
Yes.
You even asked the nurse to hold off on the pain meds for 15 minutes, right?
Yes.
Because you know what effect the medication can have on somebody's ability to accurately relate information to you, right?
I was worried it might cause him to fall asleep or something.
But weren't you worried that he might experience more pain if he didn't get his pain medication?
Well, we asked if he was okay waiting.
He was okay. He said, I can answer questions, right?
Right.
It was the nurse that wanted to give him the pain medication.
Well, in any situation, the nurse comes in at scheduled intervals to try to give you that stuff, but ultimately the patient needs to be in control of whether or not you're taking it.
So this grilling that you gave him in this emergency room while he was bleeding, you don't see any problem with that?
No.
Do you think that any parent would allow you to do that to their child?
Objection to speculation.
Sustained.
That nurse was back in 14 minutes, wasn't she?
I have no idea what the time frame for her coming back.
Because you asked her to wait 15 minutes, right?
Sure.
But you spent another 4 hours with him.
Right.
So that amount of time didn't really matter, did it?
No. You know, he didn't change the whole time he was there. It was the same thing, you know. He wasn't falling asleep. He wasn't nodding off. He was still able to answer questions.
And because you know that this is going to be played in front of the jury, during the course of this interview, you humiliate him, don't you?
Again, anything I said to him or my demeanor or my questions were all meant to influence him.
And those were interrogation techniques.
Yeah, some of what I do is an interrogation technique, of course.
You made fun of him, right?
Can you explain how I made fun of him?
Who's going to pay for your Chick-fil-A? Remember saying that to him?
Yeah, that's not me making fun of him. Chick-fil-A habit, sadly, is the problem I have to pay for every day. I have a teenage daughter that routinely goes to Chick-fil-A, so my example for someone that doesn't have any money in their bank account just fell back on my own experience.
That wasn't you commenting on the defendant being overweight
Not at all.
or being lazy,
Not at all.
because you called him that too, right?
I don't recall.
All right. And when he mentioned that his dad had a foot problem, you said, well, now you both have foot problems. Remember saying that?
Yeah,
That's kind of a snide remark, wasn't it?
Well, I was pointing out that you'd been shot in the foot, and now you both had foot problems.
That's making fun of him. When you asked him what his sister's passcode was to her phone, you said, is it Daddy's favorite number 1? You said that, right?
Right.
You also said to him, what are you hoping to get a job being the number 1 guy on Halo? You said that to him too.
Right.
To let the jury know your disdain for him, right?
That was not to let the jury know my disdain for him.
Because you know you can't do that on the stand. You know you can't give your opinions on the stand, right?
I give my opinions all the time on the stand.
Not as to the defendant's guilt or innocence, you can't. You know that.
Yes.
And the beauty of it is, throughout this entire interview, it doesn't even matter what he says. You've made him look guilty just by the way you ask questions, right?
Well, again, you know, the conversation is between the investigator and the person you're interviewing. Everything I do, everything I say is meant to elicit answers from him, you know, get you to tell your side of the story, get you to tell me things, get you to convince me how things really happened. I mean, it's really the same for every interview.
But you know that your questions aren't evidence, right? You know the jury will be instructed that what you say isn't evidence. It's what the defendant says that matters, right?
You may. All right, Mr. Johnson, go ahead and ask another question.
Thank you. Maybe you don't know what the jury will instruct. But the jury will have seen your reactions and your questions just the same, right?
Yes.
They'll see that video.
Yes.
And when you told us that you try not to lie to people when you're questioning them, there were a number of things that you said to Alex that weren't true, right?
Yes.
You said to Alex, you told the 911 operator your mom and sister were dead.
I did.
He never said that, did he?
He didn't. At that time, I had not listened to the 911 call. I was kind of going off of what other people had said, you know, talking to the boss or whatever. He said, well, he called 911, and so I was going off of memory from a secondhand conversation about the 911 call. I wasn't trying to be deceitful in that.
You weren't trying to be deceitful, but apparently you didn't care enough to check your facts before you asked him that question.
There's no way I could listen to the 911 call in the short amount of time it took me to get up there and start that interview.
So then why say that at all?
Because someone told me that had been said.
And Alex's response to that was, I did? Right?
Yes.
He was surprised that you said that he said that.
Yes.
Because what he told you was he didn't see his mother that morning, right?
Right.
And he told you he didn't see his sister that morning, except from the doorway while she was in her bed.
Right.
He didn't know, he told you he didn't know what their condition was, right?
Correct.
So to be consistent with that, he wouldn't have told the 911 operator that his mom and his sister were dead, right?
Well, he certainly could have told the 911 operator that and then told me something different. That's not uncommon.
But I'm saying, in fact, you know he didn't say that to the 911 operator, did he?
I know what the 911 call shows now, but that's not the information I had when we were conducting the interview. That's not me in any way trying to, you know, cut corners or I'm just trying to go off of what I had.
You told him that the security system had been ripped out of the wall.
Correct.
It hadn't been, had it?
Well, the alarm was not mounted on the wall properly, and it looked like it was no longer being used. I later found out that it had probably been that way for a long time.
Well, that's what Alex told you, right?
Yes,
He said that the alarm system hadn't been used for a long time
correct.
because it kept going off when it shouldn't have.
Yeah, and I think that's probably accurate.
And then you told him that the cameras had been unplugged,
Right.
but they weren't.
That's correct. I was also told that on the phone by people at the scene that they thought the cameras had been unplugged.
Yeah. So when Alex got to the police station, your big news was what Alex had told you all along, which is that the cameras were working.
Right.
So you changed your story there, didn't you?
I got updated information that that was a mistake.
And despite all of this questioning, all of your interrogation tactics that you used, all of your insulting, Alex never lost his composure, did he?
That's a difficult answer to.
Okay. He didn't call you, he didn't say any names to you, did he?
No,
Didn't make fun of you,
no.
didn't lose his temper.
I don't know what his baseline temper is, but there was a couple times he was a little upset, but not too bad.
Well, he got upset with you continually saying that he was the guy who killed his parents, right?
Probably.
Well, I mean, it's on the video, right?
Well, I mean, that's probably what he was upset about. I did say that.
And even when you weren't respectful to him, he was respectful to you, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was respectful.
You were trying to get that rise out of him, weren't you? That was an interrogation technique. You're trying to get him mad, show you some of that homicidal rage that would have caused him to slaughter his family. That's what you were trying to do, weren't you?
No.
And in the midst of Alex being respectful and asserting that he did not do this, he asked if you would do more investigation, didn't he?
Yes.
He asked if you had looked at the neighbors' cameras, right?
Yes.
He asked if you talked to the neighbors, right?
Yes.
He asked if you could do lab testing.
Yes.
He repeatedly said, I know that the guy was there, that the intruder was there.
He did.
Despite all of your protestations to the contrary, he said, I know what I saw.
Yes.
And on that video, at 9:13, the nurse in the room says, how bad are you hurting right now? This is at 9:13 a.m. Alex says, I'm doing better, actually. And the female healthcare worker says, okay, after the pain meds I gave you? And Alex said, yeah. And the female healthcare worker said, what would you rate it, a 0 to 10, 10 being the worst? Alex said, honestly, it's like a 2. Remember when he said that?
Yes.
And that was in front of you.
Yes.
So you knew at 9:13 in the morning that he'd been given pain medication.
Yes.
Alex said that at 9:14 there was a man. There was a man above my dad. You remember when he said that?
I do.
I think he hurt my dad. Right? That's what he said.
He said that.
And the female, or the nurse, or she's a healthcare worker anyway, so you try to take the gun from the guy, and Alex said, yeah. Remember when he said that?
Could you start that question again, please?
Sure. So then the female healthcare worker said, so you tried to take the gun from the guy? And Alex said, yeah.
Correct. The nurse was asking him questions at that time, too.
And at 9:16 and 54, Investigator Lucina says, my name is Sarah, and I'm an investigator with the police department. And this is my partner, Matt. He's an investigator, too, at the police department. And Alex said, oh, good, right?
Yes.
And then, shortly after that, 9:17:30 mark, the doctor says, we're going to get you something for pain, okay? And Alex said, okay. And then, you remember that part?
Yes.
And then at this time, Investigator Bosenberg is taking photos, right?
Correct.
And Alex says to him, do you like feet? And he says, what's that? And Alex says, do you like feet? And Investigator Bosenberg goes, oh, no, I like to take photos. Words to that effect, right?
Correct.
At 9:19 and 58 seconds, when you asked about the cameras, Alex said, there's like a camera in front. And he goes, oh, there's one by the garage too, right?
Correct.
In fact, throughout this entire interrogation of Mr. Jackson, it became pretty clear that he didn't even know there was a camera in the backyard, didn't it?
Correct.
And then at 9:25, you say, hey, Alex, this is kind of confusing for us. All these circumstances, and we would like to chat with you some more about what happened and try to help you figure it out. And that's when you gave him his Miranda warning, right?
Correct.
And Alex, when you asked him he could answer questions or not, he said, sure. And then, is that right?
Yes.
And then you said, all right, with those in mind, would it be all right if we chatted with you? And he said, yeah. Right?
Right.
And at 9:25:50, you say to him, hopefully the staff will be back to get going on your foot here shortly because I know you're in some pain. Right?
Right.
But it wasn't very long after that. See, that was at 9:25. Four minutes later, the female nurse comes in. She goes, can I give him pain meds? And Sarah Lacina says, is your foot real bad? Do you think you can hold off on pain meds for maybe 15 minutes for us to talk to you? And Alex says, I can talk. Right?
Correct. So at that point, we didn't realize he had necessarily had anything. I wasn't aware of it. He seemed coherent, was able to talk to us, no problem. Thought we'd like to continue this for a little bit. He wasn't acting like he's in pain. When I said you're in pain, I was making small talk, trying to be polite, which occasionally I do. But we just thought, if we could get 15 more minutes of him being clear like this, let's get as much information as we can to help the investigators on scene go find this guy.
But 4 minutes after you said, hopefully they'll get you some pain medication, 4 minutes later you were asking them to hold off on the pain medication.
Yeah, again, I really didn't know how much pain he was in. He wasn't really acting like he was in pain. Again, that was me just being polite, making small talk. And when we asked if we could wait 15 minutes, we didn't just tell her to go away and come back in 15 minutes. I mean, we asked his opinion on it. We're not going to let you just sit there and suffer if, so that's what that is.
Alex told you at 9:35 when the investigator Lucina said, was everyone getting along real good last night? Alex said, yeah, we have family time every night, right?
Right.
And that was sort of in the middle of when Alex was explaining what had occurred. He was talking about the person who attacked him. And he said that he had seen him messing with his gun, and he killed my dad, I think. Sarah Lacina said, he killed your dad? Yeah, you remember that?
Yes.
And she said, why do you think that? He said, I don't know. Sarah Lacina said, was your dad saying anything to him? And Alex said, he was on the floor and I ran at him, right?
Right.
Sarah Lacina said, your dad was? And Alex said, my dad was on the floor. And you said, and you ran at the guy with the gun? And Alex said, yeah. You remember that conversation?
I do.
And you said, what room were you guys in? And Alex said, downstairs at the bottom. And you said, it was like a big family room, right?
Right.
That's what you said.
Right.
And it was Sarah Lacina who then changed the topic from what occurred that night to whether the family was getting along.
Right.
It wasn't Alex that did that. He was just answering the questions. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take your word for it. It's a little, as 4 hours of talking, it's a
I
little hard to
understand.
remember exact.
I don't expect you to have the whole thing memorized. You let me know if you don't, if I ask you something and you don't recall it.
Sure, as long as you're referencing, the video like you are, it should be fine.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then around the 9:35:32 mark, Investigator Bosenberg comes in and swabs Alex's hands, right?
Right,
And you say maybe the bad guy's DNA is on there. Who knows? Right?
right.
You said that.
I did.
Alex described that the guy's voice was deep and that he said, "Fuck you," right?
Correct.
And that they struggled over the gun and Alex got shot in the foot.
Correct.
Sarah Lucina asked him at 9:37, had you gone to any other part of the house? And Alex said no. Right?
Correct.
She said, okay, do you know where your mom and sister home? And Alex said, I think so, yeah, should be. Right?
Correct.
That's on the video. Correct?
Correct.
And he said that he had not seen the guy before and didn't recognize his voice, right?
Correct.
You asked at 9:40 about Alex's family and whether they'd be upset about anything and how he felt about his family. Remember that?
Yes,
Alex said, I love my family. Right?
he did.
And you said, do they ever do anything that upsets you? And Alex says, well, yeah, they're family. Right? That's what he said.
Correct.
You said, tell me about that. What did they do that upsets you? Well, it's just like we have had certain things, but we're fine. Family is important. Right?
Yes, he said that.
He didn't say it was all rosy and wonderful, did he?
He didn't use those words.
Okay. And Sarah Lucina asked him, do you do a lot with your family? Like, I know what you said, you guys watch movies or you have family time for an hour at night. And Alex said, yeah. Right?
Yes.
He talked about eating, that they try to eat at every meal. Remember that?
I do.
That they were planning a family trip to Oregon later this summer.
I remember him saying that, yes.
And in the 9:42 mark, he talked about going shooting with his dad. Right?
Correct.
That's something they enjoy doing.
Yes,
In fact, there were a lot of guns in this house, weren't there?
there were.
There were a number of guns in the safe, right?
Correct.
And there were a number of guns in the master bedroom in the closet.
Correct.
Do you remember how many guns were in the master bedroom in the closet?
No.
Around 5 or 6, wasn't there? Something like that?
I don't remember.
Okay. And these were not secured, were they?
No, I don't think they were secured.
They were just in the closet, right?
I don't remember. I remember them being in the master bedroom.
Okay.
Could be the closet, could be the bedroom. I don't recall exactly.
Did anybody ever check to see if any of these firearms were loaded?
You would need to ask one of the ID officers about the status of that.
And you asked him what kind of guns he shoots, and he talked about long guns, right?
That's right.
And that they like to shoot at a driving range in Iowa City.
Yes, correct.
And then at 9:44, that's when the nurse comes back in and says, I'm giving you some more of what they gave you, okay? And Alex says, oh, okay. Right?
Correct.
Alex says, what is that? And the nurse says, fentanyl, the same medicine they gave you in the ambulance. Right?
Yes.
You go back to what Alex told you had happened, and he talked about that he and the intruder were wrestling over the gun, right?
Yes.
And Sarah Lucina said, you said that your dad was there laying on the ground, and then you called 911, right?
Yes.
And Alex said, well, I called after I crawled away.
Right.
And Sarah Lucina said, you crawled away? And Alex said, yeah. Remember that part?
I do.
And Sarah Lucina said, and then you called. Did you get back over to your dad? And he said, yeah. Right?
Right.
So Alex described that after that, he had crawled back in the direction of his father, right?
Right.
At 9:47 and 49, Alex said, my mom is here, or, remember when he said that?
I do.
He asked if his mom was there.
Right.
He talked about how he enjoyed trading on the stock market with his dad, right?
Yes.
And during all of this time, Investigator Bosenberg is swabbing Alex's body and hands, right?
Yes.
Swabbing his legs, right?
Right. You got to do that right away.
You got to do that right away
Yes.
because there might be DNA there.
Well, there's a bunch of people that are going to touch him, so we don't.
Yeah, but
Why
that's
don't
what
you
you're
get it done
looking
before
for.
then?
Swabbing for DNA, right?
Yeah, swab the blood and spots and stuff they find. Yes.
And then you tell him that you talked to the neighbors and you went over to the house and there's no evidence that anyone else was there. You tell him that, right?
Yeah.
And Alex says at 10 o'clock in the morning, but there was a man there. Right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question exactly.
That's okay. Alex's response to your statement was, but there was a man there. Right?
Correct.
And then Sarah Lucina says, Alex, we're not here to judge you at all, like I said. And Alex said, I went downstairs and the man was there. I fought him. I got shot. I think he left. Right?
Right.
And you challenge him and say, that's not what the evidence was showing, right?
That's correct.
But you hadn't been to the scene, right?
Correct.
And Alex said, well, he was there. He had said it again, right?
He did.
Then you asked, have you ever had any problems with him, meaning his father, like serious problems with him, like him judging your life choices? And Alex said, no, he's proud of me. Remember when Alex said that?
Yes.
And then you asked, how about mom? And Alex said, yeah. And you said, sister? And Alex said, I guess, right?
Yes.
You guess is what you said. Tell me about this relationship with your sister. It doesn't seem like it's quite. Alex said, I mean, we're brother and sister. We're not the closest, right?
He said that, yes.
You said, do you like her? Or Sarah Lucina said, do you like her? And he said, yeah, she's my sister. Sarah Lucina says, so what do you think about what happened to your sister? This is at 10:04:55, and Alex said, what happened to her? Right?
Yes.
And then Sarah Lucina says at 10:05:51, you know who hurt your family. And he goes, well, I do, but I don't. And Sarah goes, you do. And Alex goes, but not really. Right? Sarah, right? You remember this?
I do.
Sarah Lucina says, what do you mean? Alex says, it was that guy. You said, there's not a guy. Right?
That's correct.
You said, because we looked at the videos, there's nobody coming and going from your house. Nobody entered or locked your house, okay? So the person that hurt your family was inside your home. Right?
Correct.
But nobody had looked at any videos at that point, had they?
Yeah. The people that were out at the scene were canvassing, getting videos. I didn't just throw that out there.
Okay.
That was information I'd received. I don't know what cameras they were referring to necessarily, but I was told there was no video of anyone coming or going.
Alex said, it's not me. Sarah Lucina said, you didn't hurt your family. And Alex said, no, I would never. I love my family. Remember when he said that?
I do.
Alex said at 10:07, I wouldn't. Right?
Right.
Then you asked him, have you or your parents ever talked about getting committal health treatment? I think that must have been mental health treatment or anything like that. Anyone in your family? Remember when you asked him that?
Yes.
And Alex said no, right?
Right.
Do you have a history in your family of anyone with any mental health problems? Alex said, not that I know of, right?
Correct.
Alex said, 10:08 says, what else can I tell you? Right?
Right.
I didn't do that if that's what you're trying to say. Right?
Right.
And then and a few seconds later, he goes, hey, I'm telling you, I didn't do it. I would never. And at 10:09, and that's what he said, right?
Right.
At 10:09, Investigator Lucina said, and that's what I mean. That's why I want to know why, is because you're adamant that you would never, but the evidence is pointing towards that you did. And Alex's response to that was, well, can't you do some lab stuff?
I do.
And you said, I mean, the best evidence in a case like this is not going to be the lab stuff. You said that, right?
I did.
You didn't really mean that, though, did you?
Yeah. Sometimes better evidence than the lab stuff.
Well, you're a big believer in the lab stuff, though, aren't you?
I love the lab stuff. I do. But it's not always the end-all be-all in some of these cases.
Alex, when you said that, Alex said, well, I think that helps, right?
He did.
He wanted you to do the lab stuff, right?
He acted like he wanted us to.
He said, I'm sure that someone was there, right?
He did.
And then Sarah Lucina says, for example, when you called 911, Alex says, yeah. She says, okay, you told them that your mom and your sister had been shot. Remember when Sarah Lucina said that?
I do.
And we've already discussed that that wasn't true, right?
Yeah, we've discussed it, how we came to that conclusion.
And Alex said, did I? Right?
Right.
And Sarah Lucina says, yeah. And Alex says, I don't know. Right?
Correct.
Then you said, Alex, I just asked you about your sister, and you acted like you had no idea what happened to her. And Alex said, yeah, is she fine? Right?
Correct.
And you said, well, you told 911 dispatch that your mom and your sister were shot. And Alex said, well, maybe they are. And she said, okay, well, you told them they were. That's what Sarah Lucina said. And Alexander Jackson said, are they fine? Right?
Correct.
And Alex cleared that up and said, I saw my sister. And Sarah Lucina says, where did you see your sister? Near her bed. I don't know. And Sarah Lucina says, okay. And Alex says, I hope she's fine. Right?
Yes.
And Sarah Lucina says, and that's consistent with what you're telling us the evidence is showing at the scene, okay? Originally, we were talking. You said that you had gotten up from the porch because you heard gunshots. You went directly downstairs. Well, you were in your sister's room. And Alex says, well, I was, because I went to my room to grab a belt, but it broke, so I wrapped it in the closest thing and stuff. That's what Alex said, right?
Yes.
That he went to his room to grab a belt.
Correct.
His room is right next to his sister's room, right?
It is.
And then you said, Sarah Lucina said, okay, and then did you go into your mom and dad's room? He said, no, I haven't been there for a while. Right?
Correct.
So Alex was saying he was outside his sister's room, but he didn't go inside his sister's room.
Well, he claimed that.
Well, at least in terms of the blood trail that he left, he didn't go into his sister's room, did he?
No. The blood trail suggests that he shot himself in his room.
Well, there was a blood trail from the living room that went to Alex's room, did it not?
Yeah, there's a dark blood trail leaving his room out to his dad and a lighter blood trail going back to his bedroom. There's no blood in front of his sister's door.
You can, that's my point, thank you. But the direction of the trail, when the officers first come in on the video, you can see there's only one trail, right?
No, I can see two.
When the officers first come in?
Yes.
Okay. And then Alex says, well, yeah, of course, there was a guy in my house. I saw him. Remember when Alex said that?
Yes.
He said, I want the guy found, right?
Yes, he did.
At 10:14, he said, I didn't do it, okay? I would never hurt my family. They are important to me. I love them. You may not understand that, but I love them, right?
Yes.
And then at the 10:16 mark, after Alex again has continued to deny this, Alex says, I thought you guys were supposed to help me. You remember when he said that?
Yes.
He said, I thought you guys were supposed to help me. And then you start going to talk about the camera system again. And Sarah Lucina says, because the neighbors, do you know neighbors have them too? Alex said, they do. I think some of them do, yeah. Remember that?
Yes.
And then you say, so at what point did you unplug the camera? And Alex says, unplug what camera? You said, your camera. He says, I don't know how they work. They're also hooked up to the garage. I don't know. They're also wireless, right?
Yes.
Suggesting that you could not unplug those cameras if you wanted to.
Right, that's what he was suggesting.
And you said the alarm system's been pulled off the wall at 10:18. Remember when you said that?
I do.
And Alex said, there's no alarm system. It hasn't been there for years, right?
Right.
And what we've already discussed, he said, it always goes off.
Correct.
It had always gone off before.
Yes.
3 times in a row, then Alex says, well, you guys are trying to say, I would never. I didn't do nothing. I don't know. Remember when he said that after that?
Yes.
Alex told you what he had for dinner the night before, right?
Yes.
That his mom had made chicken, right?
Correct.
That was one of those Costco dinners, right?
Correct.
That he went downstairs and played games. They watched a movie or part of it and played more games.
Correct.
And then he described hearing the gunshots and he ran downstairs, right?
Right.
There was a man in black clothing. He had green shoes.
Correct.
He had the gun. I ran at him. We wrestled. I think I pushed him maybe a couple times. He shot me, or maybe I shot me. I don't know, because we were fighting over it, right? That's what Alex said.
Yes.
That I was crawling to my bedroom because when he shot me, my foot was going like a fountain, right?
Correct. He said he crawled to his bedroom.
And you asked if he had shoes or socks on. He said, no, no shoes or socks because I just woke up, right?
Yes.
And then you said, and then at what point did you go up and check on your mom and your sister? Because we know that you did at some point. You were up there with them. Alex said, I wasn't upstairs. Right?
Right.
You said, or wherever they were at. Alex said, when I wrapped my foot, I saw my sister's bedroom. Right?
Yes.
You said, was her door open or closed? He said it was open. Right?
Yes.
And Sarah said all the way, and he said, yeah.
Yes.
And Alex said she was in bed. You said, that's what he said, right? She was
Yes.
in bed. You said, but you knew she wasn't sleeping at that point, though, right? Alex said, I guess, right?
Yes.
You said, yeah, tell us about it. He said, well, I hope she was fine. And Sarah Lucina said, so your sister hadn't gotten out of bed yet today. Alex said, no, I don't think so. Right?
Correct.
And investigator Lucina said, okay, had your mom? And Alex said, I don't know. Right?
Right.
Investigator Lucina said, did you go into your sister's room first? And Alex said, I don't think I ever went in her room. Right?
Correct.
Again, he was talking about seeing it from outside of her bedroom. Right?
Correct.
Alex said, I don't know. She was just in bed. Alex said, I was just at the doorway or whatever. Right?
Right.
Alex said, I couldn't move much. Right?
Correct.
And then Sarah Lucina says, Alex, why do you want to continue to hold this in? And Alex says, because I'm right. That's what he said, right?
Correct.
He said, I'm being truthful. I may be a bit fuzzy on the edges, but that's what he said, right?
Correct.
And then you asked him if, anything bad had ever happened to him before. And Alex said, nothing traumatic's really happened to me, right?
Yes, correct.
He didn't describe to you any traumatic family events, did he?
No, he did not.
You asked him how he felt about his sister. Alex said, what are you saying, like I don't like my sister or something? And you said, well, I don't know. It feels like maybe your sister. And Alex said, she's my sister, right?
Correct.
Thank you. He said, yeah, so I love her, right?
Could you rephrase that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So Alex then said, yeah, so I love her, right?
Correct.
Because she's her sister, right? That's what he's saying to you, right?
Correct. That's what he said to me.
And he says, family is pretty important to me, right?
Correct.
Alex said, I mean, we had our disagreements. I love my sister. We're just not the closest. That's what he said, right?
Correct.
And then you were talking about what reason somebody might have for doing something like that, meaning the killings. And Alex said, I don't know. There's never a good reason for that. Remember when he said that?
I do.
And then you talked about burglaries and how burglaries typically occur. You remember when you went into that with him?
Yes.
And you said that burglars don't go in and shoot the family. They take what they're taking and they leave. Right?
That's correct.
And Alex said, well, maybe like my dad found him or something. Right? Remember that?
I remember him saying that, yes.
And you said, well, that wouldn't account for your mom. Right?
Definitely. Yep.
And Alex said, maybe they have some mental illness or something. And you said, that's what we thought. That was the first thing we thought.
Correct.
And then you started to launch into this conversation about what should happen to the guy who did this. Remember when you did that?
Yes.
That's an interrogation tactic, isn't it?
Yes.
Because if the person that you're interrogating acts like they shouldn't be punished that badly, you can use that as maybe a possible indicator that that's the person who did the crime.
Right. The answers to questions that go down that avenue are sometimes useful.
And this was in the context of talking about somebody who was mentally ill, right?
It was around the same time we're talking about that, but in reality, the answers to that question independently are useful in situations.
But your question was, I know you said you don't know who. I'm just saying, how are we going to get that person some help? Remember that?
Yes.
So you're still talking about in the context of someone who's mentally ill.
Yeah, in that context, yes.
And Alex said, well, we need to catch him first, right?
Yes.
And he says, probably, and then you said, well, assuming we can do that, then what do we do with him? And Alex said, probably something less than throw, or more than that, throw them in jail, but give them justice, right?
Correct.
And you said, so this is your family. If we can find this guy did it, and we discover he's got some sort of mental health issues that aren't treated, what do you want us to do? And Alex said, I still want you to lock him up, right?
Yes.
And then Alex said, oh, I guess if he's normal, I would want him locked up for the rest of eternity if possible.
Yes.
And Alex, when you started asking him about his mental state, he said, I don't think I've ever been depressed or anything. Remember when he said that?
I do.
And then when Investigator Lucina said, so that's when I was talking to you, when we first started talking, I wanted to understand why. Why would people do something out of character? And Alex said, you're asking the wrong guy, right?
He did.
And that's when Investigator Lucina brought up the lack of forced entry. Remember that?
Yes.
And Alex said, well, some of the doors might have been unlocked, right?
He said that, yes.
But Alex was the one who called 911 and said that somebody had broke into the house, right?
Yes.
Those are the words that he used on the 911 call, if you remember.
I don't remember the precise words, but if you're reading the transcript or something and he said that, then I'll agree with that.
Right. If you want, anytime you want to see it, you let me know. And then Alex points out when they bring up the fact that there's only, I think Sarah Lucina says, so if anyone was going to come, they would have to. There's one way to come in. Alex said there's a road behind the house. You remember when he said that?
Yes.
He said a lot of people use that road, right? Is he referring to the Usher's Ferry, that road?
He didn't say Usher's Ferry.
But he talked about a road behind the house.
He did say that.
And Sarah Lucina said, okay, well, the point is that they've looked at the neighbor's cameras and nobody goes to your house. Okay? And Alex says, well, which houses? Right?
He said that.
And then she said, your cameras have been unplugged. And you said the alarm's been ripped from the wall, like damage ripped from the wall. Right?
Yes.
I mean, you were quite descriptive about that.
That's what I was told.
Well, I wouldn't know anything about an alarm, Alex said. Right?
Yes, he said that.
So you also asked him questions about how many shots he heard, right?
Yes.
And Alex estimated that he heard 10 shots, right?
Yes.
And you gave him some credit. You said, well, you probably weren't counting them. Could have been 5 shots, right?
Yeah, we settled on 10 when
All right,
estimating.
we'll go with, and then, so you go with 10, and you said all 3 people were shot when you confronted him, and you heard 10 shots, and Alex says, sure. You said, so in theory, if that's to be accurate, then your dad should have been shot 10 times. And Alex said, how many times was he shot? Remember that?
Yes.
And you said, your dad, question mark, right? Right?
Yes.
You go, and then you said, well, I don't know. I'll double check that later, but I know it's not 10, right?
Right.
Mr. Johnson, I think it's 10:30, so we're going to take our mid-morning break at this time. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a approximately 15-minute break. Again, I'd remind you of the admonition that I've given you before, and we'll see you in approximately 15 minutes. All right, just on the record, outside the prison with the jury, anybody need anything at this point, Mr. Scheer?
I do, just briefly, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I don't know if the defense counsel intends to read the entire transcript of the 4.5-hour interview, but if that is the case, we would be making an objection to that and asking for the best evidence has been already presented by the actual interview. I see the point of asking a few questions, but if we're just going question to question, answer to answer for the next, I guess we're at 10:30 on the interview, for the next almost 3 hours, I would add that the best evidence of the video has already been omitted.
Mr. Johnson.
I think we're allowed, I'm not going to read, and I haven't been reading the entire transcript. I've been highlighting and amplifying the parts that are beneficial to my client, just like the state does when they go through. They do it every time. So I'm just doing what the state does. I'm merely pointing out things. I don't know what the jury's heard or not heard. I think I'm entitled to go through and point out statements that my client made that support my client's defense.
All right. The objection's overruled. That being said, I would like to move this along.
I would too, Your Honor.
All right. So with that in mind, the objection's overruled, and we'll take a break. Unless anything else, Mr. Scheer? No, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right.
don't know. I didn't see him. I'll ask. Yeah, I'm not good with the. You don't sound too bad. Oh. Put it up. Oh, like that. Okay, I'll try that. I thought I was supposed to talk over it.
My hand cut off, so.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. You got it ready to go. The first one. Oh.
You know what I mean?
All right, go ahead and have a seat, everybody. All right, we're back on the record after our mid-morning break. Again, we have our jurors, counsel, Mr. Jackson present. Investigator Denlinger is still at the stand. And again, as I do after every break, I'm going to remind you, sir, that you are still under oath. And with that, Mr. Johnson, you may resume your cross-examination.
Thanks. Is this working okay if I have it up here like this? Can you hear me okay, Kathy? Okay. I've been told you can't. All right. That better? Okay. All right. I'm sorry if I'm overpronouncing my P's or right there. Maybe if I back off a little bit. All right. Investigator, at 12:14 and 45, you said, and then there's these cameras in your house that are strangely not working when this happened. And Alex said they should be working. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. You remember at one point in time you talked to him about the Menendez brothers case?
Yes.
And you talked about the Menendez brothers were two young men that shot and killed their parents and said it was an intruder.
Yes.
And then they changed their story and said that their father had been abusing them, and that's pretty much their whole lives, and that's why they killed them.
Yes.
And you remember what Alex said when you brought that up?
No.
He said, "My parents were good to me. I'll say that now and forever." Remember when he said that?
Yes.
Alex talked to you about his grades, right?
Yes.
And his job situation,
Yes.
and that his grades have been going downhill, right?
They had been, yes.
And that he didn't have a job at the time, right?
Yes, correct.
And that his dad had wanted him to get a job.
Correct.
And that his dad wanted him to get a job, or he was going to potentially kick him out of the house, right?
Correct.
But Alex also said that his dad was very understanding about all of that, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't remember him talking about his dad being very understanding about that.
You don't remember him saying that my dad makes me make my own mistakes?
Yeah, I recall him saying that. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to speed this up. So.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm not sure I agree that, your synopsis was accurate to the wording.
Okay. And that his dad was giving him $100 a month. Remember when he told you that?
Yes.
All right. And that Alex took full responsibility for his grades and his job situation, didn't he?
Well, he told me about the situation.
But he said that, it's in the video, but he said that's my own fault, right?
Yeah, he basically suggested that he needed to get more focused.
And that his dad was understanding.
Yeah, I don't recall him saying that his dad was understanding. I recall him saying that his dad was going to kick him out.
He said that he understood, that his dad understood his situation, that he wants the best for me. Remember Alex saying that?
I do recall him saying his dad wanted the best for him.
And that as long as he got a job for the summer, his dad would be okay with it, right?
I'm sorry, unless you're quoting it, I'm hesitant to agree on your synopsis.
I'm sorry.
I know you don't want to go over all of that. I apologize. And but sometimes you're without being able to recall exactly what he said. I'm hesitant to just blindly agree to your version of it, even if it is accurate. It sounds better when you're just quoting it.
Okay. Well, that's what I get for. I'm not blaming you.
I know we're stuck. It's okay.
I was just trying to move it along. Let me. At 12:25 and 44, he refers to his dad. He says he is understanding and that he's been giving him $100. Remember when Alex said that?
Yes.
And he said that was once a month.
Yes.
And you remember him saying that his dad lets him make his own mistakes?
Yes.
Okay. He told you at 12:50 that about cleaning the gun. Remember when he talked about that?
Yes, I remember him talking about cleaning the gun.
He said, well, I've got the ramrod thing. I know we put that back at least I put it back in the exercise room. That was referring to cleaning the gun. You remember when he said that?
I do.
And then you said, okay, anything else cleaning stuff? And Alex said, like the ramrod, a few towels, some stuff. Right?
Yes.
And you said, so you cleaned the barrel. And he said, well, we cleaned the whole thing because we didn't want our hands oily on it.
Correct.
In terms of where the firearm was left, Alex told you about whether it was left by the fireplace or not. Alex told you that when he left, his dad was still looking at the gun, right?
Correct.
And you said the gun was not left out on the fireplace where you cleaned it. Alex said it was left. And you said, okay, it was left on the fireplace. And Alex said, yeah. Remember that?
Yes.
And around 12:57, you said, well, what's going to happen when we find your mom's blood on your hands from those swabs? And Alex said, you aren't going to find my mom's blood on my hands. Remember that?
Yes.
And then at the 1 o'clock mark, you said, well, about him telling you need to move out if you didn't get a job, Alex said, well, that's just because what I should do, right?
Yes.
And then at the 102:52 mark, you were talking again about this, about whether or not his dad was frustrated with him. And Alex said, "Oh no, I understand. He wants the best for me." Remember when he said that?
Yes.
Now, you testified on direct examination about touch DNA. You remember that?
Yes.
And you're not a criminalist with the Division of Criminal Investigation, are you?
Nope.
But you do know that touch DNA is a real thing that labs test for, right?
Yes.
And maybe you didn't mean to say this, but you said at one point on direct you never get touch DNA.
No, I meant to say that.
You did?
That was in reference to stuff that I work on.
Okay. But you worked on the Jacqueline Holmes case.
Yes.
There was touch DNA in that case.
Where?
All right. Well, do you know a Sabrina Seehafer? Ever heard of her? I'm sorry, ever heard of her?
Yeah, the name's not. I mean, I've heard that name before. I'm not sure where you're getting the name from, though.
Well, she's a criminalist with the DCI,
Okay.
and that's the state lab, the criminalistics laboratory.
Sure.
And she would know a lot more about touch DNA than you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, she's got quite the resume here of her experience to be someone who works in the lab. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree that she's qualified to work in the lab.
And that she would be more qualified than you to talk about touch DNA.
Right.
And would you be surprised to learn that her opinion of touch DNA is much higher than yours?
Yeah, I'd be surprised to learn that her opinion, because I talk to the head of the DCI lab section all the time about exactly that.
Well, when she testified in the Jacqueline Holmes case, she talked about touch DNA being easy to find.
Well, that might be her opinion on that.
Right. And one of the items that was submitted to the lab in the Jacqueline Holmes case was a knife. You remember that?
Yes.
And there was a DNA profile developed from the swabs of the unstained portion of the knife handle. Right?
Repeat that, please.
There was a DNA profile developed from the unstained portion of the knife handle.
Okay.
That would be touch DNA, wouldn't it?
Does it say touch DNA?
Well, it doesn't ever say touch DNA, but you testified that you can get DNA from saliva, right?
Right.
Blood, right?
Right.
Sweat.
Does it say the knife handle's dry?
It says the unstained portion of the knife handle. Yes, the knife handle was dry.
It doesn't say it was dry. It says it was unstained.
Well, Sabrina Seehafer testified in that case because you can call witnesses from the DCI to interpret lab results, can't you?
Yeah, that's fine that she testified to that. I'm not saying that touch DNA is not a real thing. I accept that it's a real thing. But in that particular case, you're referring to an unstained portion of a knife handle, and in no way does it say that that's touch DNA.
Well, that was her testimony.
She said touch DNA?
Yes,
She used the word?
she did.
Okay, well, there you go. There's the example. I guess I'll quit saying never and use very infrequently as my new position for whether or not we get touch DNA. But that doesn't change the fact that if it's so easy to get, why did we not get it on anything here?
Well, you did get it. Well, maybe you didn't submit the samples in this case.
We sure did.
You didn't
I
submit-
read them off to the court.
You didn't submit any of the swabs from the defendant's hands, legs, or any of that to the DCI.
Well, I'm talking about the gun.
Yeah, I understand that.
The
certain
murder
portions of the gun swab were submitted to the DCI and other portions were not. And then we don't have to speculate about the prevalence of touch DNA, there's been a number of studies published on it, haven't there?
I'm sure there's been lots of studies published on it, and I've worked quite a few cases where touch DNA was discussed by people on the stand.
Well-
And there's varying views on it, but the reality is we send stuff in all the time. I wish touch DNA was better. I wish we could get it all the time. We very infrequently get it. It's not for lack of effort. We will send the things in that we think people touched. And in this particular case, common sense tells you that that trigger was touched 15 times. Let's swap that. Let's send that in. Because what does that DNA tell you about what happened? It tells you a heck of a lot more than the DNA on a cup in the kitchen. And when we sent that in, they couldn't find anything. It was touched 15 times. 15 times.
Are you aware of I'm sorry, were you done?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you aware of studies that basically just have people touch things and then they test them to see if they left an identifiable amount of DNA?
I've read some of those studies, yes.
And the prevalence of that is what percentage?
Every study is going to be different. I'm not going to, and I don't have any of them in front of me. I didn't, of course, read any prior to coming here today. Most of my information, although I have read studies, I'll usually call the head of the DCI crime lab and confer with them about what items would be practical to send or not.
All right.
And I was told directly.
So I'm asking you about studies now.
Okay.
And I'm asking you if you're aware of studies that have been published that have documented the prevalence of touch DNA on items that people simply touched.
I am aware of those studies.
And
I have read those studies. I don't have any of the data from those studies because it's been several years since I found that necessary to read for the particular case I was working on. In my research to find it, I found that with any study, there's varying degrees of, people come up with different things depending on the nature of their study. Some of the studies are done in the most ideal circumstances ever to produce the results you want. Some of them are a little closer to real world, and these might produce a different result. So to be honest with you, I'm not going to give you a percentage because I don't think there's a study out there that you could cite that will give the definitive percentage on touch DNA. I go off of my experience, and it's vast.
Well, but we don't have to go off of your experience, right? We could go off of the experience of the Department or the Division of Criminal Investigation, couldn't we?
I rely on that also. I've spoke directly to the head of the DCI lab, DNA section, this morning about this very topic.
And somebody from the Division of Criminal Investigation could have come here in this case and interpreted the findings in this case instead of you, right? Isn't that not true?
I'm not interpreting the findings.
You read them off when Mr. Scheer gave them to you, right? Gave you the report.
They interpreted it, and I just read it.
But no, you didn't just read it. You talked about touch DNA and how you never get it. Remember that?
I talked about my experience with it, yes.
But wouldn't it be better to hear it from somebody from the Division of Criminal Investigation? Somebody who knows what they're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about.
Okay. And in this particular case, not only were the swabs of the defendant not submitted to the DCI, but neither was the swab 14F from the barrel lock, swab G from the front sight, swab 14H from the adjusting ring, swab 14I from the wooden stock, and swab 14M from the end of the barrel.
Correct.
So you don't want to talk about the studies and the prevalence of touch DNA?
No, I don't have those in front of me. I haven't reviewed any of them. I'm happy to listen to you talk about them, but I haven't read them this morning, so. asking me to quote statistics on studies I read 3 or 4 years ago and even remember the source is silly.
You talked about the Menendez brothers with my client. And I know as a DNA enthusiast that you are, that you have kept up on that case out of Idaho, right?
Sadly, I haven't had time, but I'm aware of some basic.
Wasn't that a touch DNA case?
Oh, I really have no idea.
This is the case where they found the DNA on the snap on the knife sheath. Remember that? That's how that case got broken wide open.
Did someone testify that that's where that was at?
The snap.
Are you going off of the news, or what are you
I'm
going
going off the news, yeah. Isn't that a touch DNA case?
You're relying on the news?
I'm just asking you a question.
Yeah, the answer is I don't know where they got the DNA from that one.
Okay, all right. Without the DNA that they found on the sheath of the knife, there would have been no evidence that that guy was ever there.
I can't be really asked to cite facts from a case I have no information on.
Do you remember what the description was of the guy in that case?
No.
Tall guy?
I've seen him on the news now, so I know what he looks like, but I didn't get that. I have no idea what the original description was.
Tall guy, wearing all black, bushy eyebrows. That was the description. Does that ring a bell for you?
Not at all.
All right, turning to the Ring camera system then. Can we play that? We might have to, we're going to try to do it from here, but
Are you wanting to publish?
yes, Your Honor,
part of
the two backyard camera views.
All right. Are you ready to go?
Almost, Your Honor.
Just let me know.
I think we should be good to go, Your Honor.
And I think we should be there. I'm just going to...
Start of that backyard Ring camera video. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
That's where Mr. Jackson is first picked up by the camera on this was the day before, right?
Yes.
And you know that the subpoena for the Ring camera footage was for June 11th, 12th, 14th, and 15th, right?
Yes.
And this was the only video, this one and its companion, when Mr. Jackson returns, this is the only video from that entire period that Ring had, right?
Correct.
So if anything else was in the backyard on the 11th, 12th, 14th, or 15th, the Ring camera did not pick it up. Would that be fair to say?
No, I mean, that doesn't really encompass it because, again, we don't know what the settings are.
Okay. What I meant to say was, if something had crossed it through its trajectory through its motion detection, the Ring camera didn't register it, right?
It didn't register any other videos, just this particular one. And again, I have no idea what their settings would have been, so.
But you don't find that odd that the only video was from the 11th, 12th, 14th, and 15th was this one?
Yeah, on the surface, it seems a little odd, but when I look at pictures and other things and the family's behavior, it seems less odd. I mean, they don't have any patio furniture out. It's all covered. Whatever they got back there is covered. All the plants out there that are in pots are all dead. She's got plants on the side of the house by the driveway that she goes out and waters. They go walk the dog out the front. I mean, it doesn't look like they spent any time there. When you look at the ID photos, the grass is this much taller than the pavement. And although I saw him out weed eating at one point on the other cameras, I don't know, it just doesn't look to me like anyone goes out into that backyard. They don't have it set up to go enjoy.
Well, you don't know how often they went in the backyard on those dates, do you?
I don't.
And by looking at this camera, when they first picks up Alexander Jackson, it's not in the main part of the backyard. It's clear over to the left of the backyard. Would you agree with that? That's when it first picks up his motion.
This is where it first picks up his motion. I mean,
All right.
You can decide whether that's the left or the right, depending
Well,
on
left as you're looking at I'm talking about the whole backyard. In terms of the whole backyard, it doesn't pick up Alex until the left side of the backyard. Would you agree with that?
Right. I mean, this would be I would call it, to be more specific, I would call this the, probably at least 2/3 of the yard, but it's the south side of the yard.
Okay. South side of the yard. That's where it picks up Alex at first. That's when the motion detector first picks it up. Can you play that then? And there he goes, right? So we can see Mr. Jackson for just a brief period of time. Now, can we play the second one? There we see him the whole time, right? Would you agree with that?
Well, no, I mean, it cuts off while he's on the stairs.
Right, but I mean, you can see him from the beginning of that video coming back across the whole
Right. What I like
back of
about
the backyard.
what I like about this camera is it captures both entrances to the house.
I'm saying that obviously the motion detector on this camera is skewed to the left, is it not?
No, I wouldn't say that. He only walks in this one little area of the house. And that camera, it's a fixed thing. It's not like you can turn the motion sensor on the bottom or anything like that. It's fixed with the camera. It captures him walking in the same way. And one of the things you gotta, if you have a Ring camera, you would know is that you're a couple steps into the zone, or I'm sorry, it starts picking you up sometimes, before you're in or out of a particular zone. In this particular thing, it just happens to catch him walking on the sidewalk. He walks in the exact same spot. It's essentially the same video in reverse.
You say that's essentially the same video in reverse? We don't even pick him up until he's practically off camera on the first one, and it has him on the entire way back on the second one. Doesn't that suggest that the motion detection works from the left side of the picture?
Well, no, because I mean the camera, the videos are a certain amount of time, so it picks something up, right? And then I don't know how long these particular videos are, but so he spends more time off camera in the other one because he's walking away from the view, and he spends more time on it in this one because he's walking into it.
People can draw their own conclusions, can't they?
Okay.
But the other interesting fact about this particular camera is that on the garage camera, all the police activity of that day was on that camera, right?
Right.
And none of the police activity in the backyard ever showed up on that Ring camera, did it?
No, exactly. Now you're thinking like I did.
Yeah. I'm saying none of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. None of the police activity showed up on that camera.
Exactly.
So there might be something wrong with that camera.
Well, my first thought wasn't that there was something wrong with the camera.
I bet it wasn't. But Alexander Jackson didn't even have the app on his phone, did he?
Not when I looked at it.
And the Celebrite system would be able, you can go back in time on the Celebrite system, can't you?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know how far back it shows that, honestly.
the Celebrite system kicks out records for thousands of pages of records, does it not?
No, I don't think I don't think
Okay.
they print out thousands of pages.
It's a lot of data, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of data.
And you can go back and see what somebody had on their phone from months ago. Can't you?
I don't know. I don't know if you can see deleted apps.
So are you suggesting to this jury that Alexander Jackson, with an app, altered the parameters of this camera?
I don't know if he used an app on his phone, an app on Dad's phone, used the computer. The point is, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't have any evidence that this camera has been tampered with at all.
What we have is we have two views from the day before, so I know the camera's working, and the very next day it's not working.
Yeah. So Alexander Jackson must have done something to it.
I'm just saying, it's working the day before, and now it's not working.
Well, it's working skewed to the left, right?
Well, like I said, the day before it's working, this day it's not working, and to use your own words, people can make their own assumptions on why that is.
The camera's way up high on the railing, right? It's up on the railing on this camera.
Right, that's the deck
It's on
railing.
the second floor of the house.
Right, it's just on the balcony to
So
the
maybe
master.
the motion detection, why can't I say that today? Maybe the motion detector is out of range because it's up that high. Did you ever consider that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, we considered that. We tried to get into Dad's phone, look at the settings. Ring doesn't keep the settings, so it's not like we can just subpoena them and ask them to send us what Dad had set up for that camera, or modifications they'd made to it. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. We would have loved to.
And when you guys were investigating this, there was an email that was from Jeffrey Holst to you and other people trying to address what potential problems there might have been with this camera.
Right.
And this was an email.
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor.
I'm just asking if he's, as part of your investigation,
Sustained at this point. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
as part of your investigation, did Officer Holst also look into this issue?
Yes.
And you're aware of what he did in terms of investigating this?
Yes.
And did he not say?
Objection to hearsay again, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Did he not say that the backyard camera, it is possible they did not send all the clips, meaning Ring, right? Or the motion trigger is either set up differently to avoid picking up backyard animals or is not functioning correctly?
Right. He's guessing just like anyone else can. We did follow up with Ring to make sure they didn't have any further clips. Like, did you accidentally just send us one or two? And the answer was, that's all of them.
And that's not all you did, is it? You also had a bunch of officers go back there on June 17th and stand in different places in the backyard, right?
On June 17th?
Yeah.
I don't recall if they did that or not.
And then sent off a search warrant to Ring to find out if there was any more video that was generated from that.
Right. But again, it's difficult to do that when you don't know what they have it set up as.
Thank you. And do you know what the result of that experiment was?
I don't think they got any more video off of it.
Nothing.
Right.
Right. Getting back to the cell phone, I think you testified that there was some activity on Mr. Jackson's cell phone. You said that at 6:53 in the morning of the killings, he had searched at 6:53 for who played the Emperor on The Emperor Strikes Back, I think is what you said. Maybe it was Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, something similar.
Yeah. Let's go with Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
That's what was on his phone, right, at 6:53.
Yes.
There was also, on the previous day, a search of his phone that involved the movie Inglourious Bastards. Remember that?
Yes.
And that corresponds with what he told you was the movie they watched the night before as a family, right?
Correct.
Inglourious Bastards, that's good family fun to watch, right? Kind of violent.
I thought that was an odd family movie choice, but
And you had access to all of that Celebrite information, right?
yes.
And there was nothing on there about how to shoot yourself in the foot, right?
No.
Or how to kill your family and get away with it, right?
No.
People do that, right? You've been involved in cases where people searched how to dispose of a body, right? Or something to that effect. Go ahead and, I'm just, any kind of example.
Well, occasionally people do search incriminating things, and we do find that. That's why we continue to check phones.
And there was,
Not all the time, though.
and there's nothing incriminating on Alexander Jackson's phone.
Well, I wouldn't say,
Other than the two things you've already testified to.
right, other than the obvious that you're on the phone when you claim you don't have the phone. But the actual content, I didn't find anything particularly incriminating, no.
And that was, again, the last one was at 6:53, right?
I testified to that one, but without seeing that sheet in front of me, I think there actually may have been a few things after that. I don't recall, honestly.
Well, that was your testimony on direct, was that the last one was 6:53.
Okay. I remember the one at 6:53, like that specific time, and honestly, without pulling up Cellbrite between then and there, I don't remember anything between 6:53 and the time you called.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can turn the lights back up. Thanks, Terry. Now, one of the things that you did during this interrogation of Mr. Jackson was tell him that this isn't how burglaries occur. Remember that?
Yes.
And you went on and on with that about how burglars come in, they take what they want, they leave. They don't kill anybody, right?
Correct.
But Alex didn't call it a burglary, did he?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, when he called 911, he said, someone broke into the home, right?
Yes.
I'm shot.
Yes.
My dad's been shot.
Yes.
That's what Alex said in the 911 call.
Yes.
And you would agree that home invasions do occur.
A home invasion is a burglary.
Well, okay. Home invasion is a classification of burglary, but a home invasion doesn't have to involve anybody stealing anything, does it?
No, under the Iowa code, there's not a code section for home invasion. It's burglary.
Right, but you said burglars just take what they want and leave, right? But that's not what happens in home invasions.
Well, burglars, I mean, do you want my opinion on how burglaries occur?
No, we got your opinion through the video.
You didn't really get my opinion. If you
I'm
really
saying
want it, I'll spell it out for you.
there's lots of things that somebody can enter somebody's house for that have nothing to do with taking their stuff, right?
Well, I wouldn't say there's lots. Usually you break into either steal the stuff or, in this case, kill people.
Yeah. Well, but that occurs, that people come into a home and kill people, right?
Right, but my big problem with that is when you do that, you bring a weapon.
Well, who's to say that this intruder didn't have a weapon?
Why would you use their weapon if you brought one?
Because that's a better weapon. Let's say you would admit that people can go into a home for one reason, and then something else can occur, right?
Yes.
Right? That would cause somebody to get killed that maybe they didn't even intend to kill, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
I'm
that?
saying somebody could have come in for the purpose of stealing something, and then Mr. Jackson comes down, Jan Jackson, and he shoots Jan Jackson. That could have happened, right?
The reason I dislike that theory is because if you're going to kill someone while you're, burglarizing their home, you kill people that startle you, that confront you. Why would you kill someone that's in bed that hasn't even seen you? That's the first person that was shot.
That was who was the first person that was shot?
His sister.
That's your theory.
The evidence spells that out.
The sister had earplugs in her ears, didn't she?
There was one earplug found.
Oh, okay. One earplug was found, but people don't usually just wear one, do they?
Sustained.
You said this isn't the way that burglaries occur, right? That's what you said to Mr. Jackson.
Right.
And before the Iowa State incident, we would have said that people don't get killed on a golf course either, right? That never happens.
I'm sorry, what did you
Remember the young lady that was killed on the golf course who went to Iowa State? You remember that?
I guess I didn't realize she was killed on a golf course. I remember her being a golfer.
She was killed on the golf course.
Okay.
That never happens either, does it?
Well, clearly it does.
Well, it never happens until it does happen, right?
I mean, it happened in that case.
You told Alex that people don't just come in and kill people, but that's exactly what happened in Idaho, right?
Yeah, but what I really meant was that people don't just come in and kill random people.
They don't what?
Random people.
Like,
Those people in Idaho aren't random. He was stalking one of them.
well,
I cite my
that's,
source
again,
from the news.
your theory.
Well, I got that source from the news.
Okay, all right, we'll go with that. But there have been cases that people just came in and killed people randomly.
You'd have to
All right.
give me some specifics on that one.
Well, what about Ted Bundy? He attacked 4 college roommates with a piece of wood. Remember when he did that?
Yes.
Florida State University?
Florida State, yes.
Picked up a piece of wood that he found at the residence.
Right, so brought his own weapon
No, he did. That was found at the scene.
outside.
Found a weapon. He didn't have a weapon when he went to that dormitory or that sorority, did he?
Well, it's Ted Bundy. I mean, that guy's usually got a kit of stuff with him. He was stopped with that kind of stuff.
On that particular occasion, he didn't, did he?
Well, I don't know what they found in his car.
So you're saying maybe he did have a weapon with him,
I don't know.
but he used the weapon that he found at the scene. And back to the Idaho case, he left people alive in that house, didn't he? And he left, and he saw somebody on his way out, right? One of the roommates
Potentially.
saw him,
Yes.
and that was when he gave the description to the police.
Yes.
And
That's
that
my
roommate
understanding.
didn't report that for hours later.
That I have no idea.
Now, do people enter other people's homes to steal firearms?
Yes.
You're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
This house had a lot of firearms in it, didn't it?
Yes.
And not all of them were locked up.
Correct.
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Scheer, redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Investigator Denlinger, if someone is going into a house to steal a firearm, do they leave that firearm behind?
No.
I think it's safe to say that the 4.5 hours that you spoke to Mr. Jackson, the defendant, he denied killing his family.
Correct.
You've interviewed many individuals that are suspicious of killing someone. Was that a fair statement?
Yes.
Does everyone confess that they kill someone?
No, sometimes people sit through the whole interview and don't tell me the truth, and then we get to court later, and now they're pleading self-defense.
And we talked about trauma in your cross-examination about people having tunnel vision. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Talked about people being confused.
Yes.
Talked about people being in pain.
Yes.
You were able to speak to the defendant for over 4.5 hours. Did you ever see a time where he seemed confused with your questions?
Not really. I mean, there were probably less than a handful of times where he seemed like he was confused, but that certainly could have been my fault for wording the question poorly.
But he didn't seem to be giving you inappropriate answers to your questions.
No, not at all.
And you spoke to him twice, once at the hospital and at the police station.
Correct.
And both times you read him his Miranda rights.
Yes.
So both times you informed him he didn't have to speak to you.
Yes.
Have you had a chance to review or listen to the 911 call that states Exhibit 1?
Yes.
And at any time in that call, is the defendant crying?
No. Not that I can hear.
And do you remember him saying to the 911 dispatcher, "My family members have been shot"?
Yes.
Have you had a chance or have you seen State's Exhibit number 2, which was Officer Buckles' body camera?
Yes.
When the officers made contact with the defendant, was he crying?
No.
And then what about State's Exhibit number 4, Officer Barber's body cam video? Did you see the defendant crying at the residence?
No.
And was this before the defendant received any medicine?
Yes.
There was this discussion that Mr. Johnson was talking to you about, these trail of footprints going down the hall towards the defendant's bedroom. You remember that?
I do.
I'll give you a second.
Thank you. Okay.
And you were starting to kind of try to explain an answer about where he was shot or something in that. Can you tell us what you were talking about?
Right. So there are two sets of footprints in the hallway. Now he told me he was shot out by his father and that he crawled around after that. So I don't know why there's any bloody footprints. Okay. The footprints start in his bedroom, or you can see the footprints. You can follow these.
The objection's overruled. You can answer.
You can see enough of a footprint, heel, toe, that's what I'm talking about. Dark red, walking from the area of his bedroom out into the hallway. You can see where that footprint continues, steps over Dad, and then the footprints are now, and it looks like he stood there for a little bit, potentially, and then there are lighter footprints on the way back. When we came into contact with him, he's sitting in the back of the hallway. And while we're there, he crawls out. But while you're standing there looking at the carpet, you're thinking to yourself, well, that story he told me earlier doesn't seem to make sense in my opinion.
So I want to, Your Honor, if I may, republish State's Exhibit 119. And also, Officer Denlinger, did you actually go to the scene?
Yes.
And did you also personally observe these footprints yourself?
Yes.
And so looking at State's Exhibit 119, what, once again, is this a picture of?
This is Alex Jackson's bedroom towards the back of the hallway. It's looking from the doorway in towards his bed.
And when you were talking about this footprint leaving the bedroom, towards the bottom of State's Exhibit 119 being circled with the mouse, what is that?
That's a footprint
And which direction is that footprint going?
towards the door.
Did you ever see a footprint going into the bedroom?
No.
Sticking with State's exhibits, specifically State's Exhibit 61, is this the trail that was talked about in Cross and also currently now?
Yes.
And so can you explain to us what were you talking about, these direction of these footprints?
So we're standing in the family room next to the couch looking back towards Alex's bedroom. On the right, past those photos, is Alex's bedroom, followed by his sister's bedroom. On the right-hand side of that hallway, you could see a couple of things, one of them being Alex's phone. This darker trail coming out has identifiable, I mean, like everyone can see it, identifiable footprints of him coming out and dragging his foot. The footprints are directional, and they're easily identifiable as going out towards his father.
What do you mean by directional?
Meaning you can see enough of the heel, enough of the toes to know which direction that foot's moving.
And which way is that foot moving?
Towards his father.
So that foot is moving from the bedroom of the defendant towards his father.
Correct.
I want to go next to State's Exhibit 76. Looking at State's Exhibit 76, kind of towards the markers of 16 and 1, what are we observing between markers 1 and 16?
Those are more footprints
And what is the direction that those footprints are going?
towards the father.
Next, I want to go to State's Exhibit 119. This is, once again, starting back on the defendant's bedroom. When you went to this resident, looking at this photograph, where was the most pool of blood?
Next to the leg of his bed.
And so when you say the leg of the bed, the leg that would be closest towards us in viewing this photograph.
Yes.
I want to go next to State's Exhibit 121. What is this a zoomed up photo of?
That's a photo of that corner of the bed that I was explaining.
And zooming in on State's Exhibit 121, we see some red dots along that bottom portion of the bed and also on the wheel. What is that?
Blood.
Is that consistent of blood coming in an upward direction if you have shot yourself?
The objection's overruled. You can answer.
It looks like it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect or recross?
So, if I got your testimony straight, Mr. Jackson shoots himself in the foot in his bedroom. Is that what you're saying?
It looks that way.
There's no bullet found in that bedroom, was there?
No.
No shell casing found in that bedroom?
No, but he also had a shell casing in his hand at one point.
When he
And
crawled-
there's no bullet found where he claimed he was shot himself, or I'm sorry, where he claimed this shot occurred.
So you think that after he shot himself, he took the firearm back up the hallway and dropped it off on the other side of his father. Is that your theory?
That's exactly what I think happened.
Thank you. No further questions.
Anything else, Mr. Scheer?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then Investigator Demlinger, you are free to step down and I believe free to leave.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would rest.
All right. Counsel, you want to approach? We'll just talk about the schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, so I think you heard, but just to clarify, the state has rested. That means the state will be presenting no more evidence as part of its case in chief. We do have one or more witnesses on Mr. Jackson's end. We're going to start up, if it works with you folks, at I think it makes more sense to just break now rather than start a witness and start back up at 1. But I just want to make sure that's going to work for everybody. Does anybody have a problem with that? All right, I'm getting thumbs up and nods all the way around. So we'll take our lunch break now. Ask that you be back ready to go at 1 o'clock. And again, I'd remind you of the admonition that I've given you every time. Have a good break. Go ahead and have a seat. All right, we're on the record outside the presence of the jurors with everybody present. I do want to talk a little bit about the schedule and when we're going to do various things off the record. And but before we do that, is there anything on the record that we need from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson? No, Your Honor. All right, then let's go off the record. Or do you want to do that, shortly before 1 o'clock?
Allow me to confer with my co-counsel.
Go ahead.
Okay. She prefers we do it when we come back, Your Honor.
All right. And just so I'm sure we allot enough time, how much time do you think we need? Not very much. All right. If we come back at 1:45, that'd be enough time for you and the state to make a record on that? Okay.
Sure.
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you, just so we have it on the record before the weekend comes and I finalize in email draft jury instructions based on the state of the record at this point, are we prepared to make a final record on just the lesser included issue at this point, or this afternoon as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, can we just do that real quick?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go. Okay, we're back on the record after a brief discussion, and we're going to come back at 1:45 and make a record on the defendant's motion. And then right now, I want to make a record on a jury instruction issue. I've been informed off the record by both parties that the defendant is not requesting any lesser included offenses be submitted to the jury. The state is in general agreement with that, but has requested that murder in the second degree be submitted to the jury. And so essentially, at this point, as I understand it, both parties are in agreement that we submit only murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree to the jury with no additional lesser included offenses. Is that correct on the state's end?
That is correct, Your Honor. The state did have an opportunity to discuss that with defense counsel. We do want the murder in the second. I understood the defense only wanted murder in the first. We do want to include that one lesser included, but murder first and murder in the second degree is fine with the state.
And Mr. Johnson, is that correct as far as a submission on behalf of the defendant?
Let me think for a second, Your Honor. Allow me one more second, Your Honor. I know I told you.
Yeah, no hurry.
Having conferred, Your Honor, with counsel, I think if we're going to have murder too, then we should have voluntary and involuntary also submitted.
Okay. I mean, again, I guess that any limitation has to be by agreement, right? I mean, so I guess if we're going to go to voluntary and involuntary, does the state want to go further than that, or is the state comfortable just submitting those 4 as well?
I don't think that there's a factual basis to submit voluntary. I don't think there's been any evidence presented by the state or that has arisen through cross from the defendant that would support the heat of the passion killing required for voluntary. If he wants to include involuntary, I'd agree to that, but.
Mr. Johnson?
I'm just standing by our position.
I mean, do you believe that there's been any evidence which would support submission of a voluntary manslaughter instruction at this point?
I think you could make the argument there hasn't been anything for murder too. Yeah. But I think there is. I don't know what the jury's going to conclude. I mean, we've got one person in motion coming down the stairs. I guess that could be seen as provocation by somebody. I don't know.
Okay.
So I think they're.
All right. Well, this went from what I thought was a easy agreed upon decision to something more complicated. So I guess I'll consider certainly I'm going to submit the 3 that people agree on. I'll take a look at the voluntary, and we can make a final record on it when we make a record on jury instruction. So, all right, anything else?
Well, we would also be requesting the 2 instructions to the jury regarding statements made out.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean,
okay. Right.
I just wanted to make a record on where we were drawing the line as far as lesser included offenses, because I thought we had an agreement on that. And again, I'm not, I understand things change. I'm not angry about it. I just thought we were at a point where we could do that, and if we're not, that's fine. So, all right. Anything else we need to address on the record at this point by the state?
Not on the record, Your Honor, no.
Mr. Johnson?
No, Your Honor.
All right.